You would assume waking up at 2 a.m. means something is wrong with your sleep, but that's not what historians found. Diaries, court depositions, medical texts from before the 1800s describe 2 separate sleeps every night, with an hour of calm wakefulness in between, treated as completely ordinary. The disorder isn't the waking, it's the electric light that erased it. For almost all of human history, there was no such thing as sleeping through the night, no single 8-hour block, no alarm clock measuring failure against an unbroken line. There was a first sleep, a quiet hour awake, and a second sleep. That was the night, not a glitch in it, the shape of it. So why does a body 40,000 generations deep still open its eyes in the middle of the dark? Here's what we're getting into, where this 2-part night went, what your body is actually doing in that quiet hour, and why the anxiety might be the only thing that's actually new. In the early 1990s, a psychiatrist named Thomas Ware was running an experiment at the National Institute of Mental Health. He took a group of volunteers and did something simple. He extended their nights to 14 hours of darkness. No lamps, no screens, no streetlight leaking through curtains, just dark. The way a winter night used to be, before gaslighting, before filament bulbs. For the first few nights, the volunteers just slept, catching up on years of shortened rest. But by the 4th week, something changed. Their sleep split in 2. A block of about 4 hours, a period of quiet wakefulness lasting roughly an hour, then a second block of about 4 more hours. Every volunteer landed on the same pattern without being told what to expect. During that waking hour, Ware measured their blood. Prolactin levels, a hormone usually tied to calm, rest, lactation, spiked higher than at any other point in the sleep cycle. It's the same chemical that floods the body right after sex, the same one present in states researchers described as tranquil, almost meditative. The volunteers weren't tossing, weren't anxious, weren't checking a clock that didn't exist in that room. They described the waking hour as calm, unbothered, a little like floating. Ware published the findings in 1992 and gave the ancient pattern a modern name: segmented sleep. The body, given enough dark and no artificial reason to resist it, didn't malfunction. It reorganized itself back into 2 halves, on its own. So this wasn't a one-off lab result.
A few years later, a historian named A. Roger Eckerch at Virginia Tech went looking for proof that this pattern wasn't just biological, but historical. He spent over a decade combing through diaries, court records, medical texts, literature, going back to antiquity. He found the phrase more than 500 times, first sleep, in English alone, and its equivalents in French, in Italian, in Latin. A physician in the 1500s recommended studying in the hour after first sleep. A French peasant's diary mentioned prayer during that same window. Court depositions describe crimes witnessed in the space between sleeps because half the town was quietly awake at that hour, doing small, ordinary things, tending a fire, talking with a bed partner, sometimes praying, sometimes having sex. The wakeful hour wasn't hidden, wasn't shameful. It had its own vocabulary, its own etiquette, its own place in the rhythm of a night. Eckerch published his findings in 2001 in a book called At Day's Close, and the evidence pointed to the same conclusion Ware had reached in a lab with volunteers who had never read a single one of those diaries. 2 bodies of proof, 400 years apart, landing on the same night. To be fair, not every historian accepts the scale Eckerch proposed. Some argue segmented sleep was common, but not universal, shaped by season, by class, by how much artificial light a household could afford. So treat it not as a rule every human always followed, but as a well-documented pattern, common enough, widespread enough, to explain why the body still tries to return to it the moment the lights go out for long enough. So if this was normal for most of history, what actually erased it? The record is oddly specific about the timing. Cheap, reliable artificial lights spread through cities in the late 1800s, gas lamps first, then electric bulbs not long after. And with it came something the candlelit world never had, a reason to stay up later, and a reason to compress the night into a single block. In factory towns, shift schedules didn't care about a quiet hour of prolactin and prayer. Sleep became a task to complete efficiently, not a rhythm to move through. By the early 1900s, references to first sleep and second sleep had almost disappeared from print. Not because the biology changed.
Language changed because the behavior stopped being described as ordinary. It's worth noting where the word insomnia actually comes from. Latin, in, without, somnus, sleep. A word built for total absence, not for a body that sleeps in 2 parts with a lucid hour in between. The word itself assumes the 8-hour block is correct and anything else is missing something. But for most of history, nothing was missing. The 2-part night wasn't the incomplete version of sleep, it was sleep. So what happens when a 200,000-year-old rhythm meets a 150-year-old light bulb? It doesn't disappear, it just stops being explained. In the 1990s, sleep researcher William Dement at Stanford noted how many patients arrived describing the exact same symptom, waking around 2 or 3 a.m., lying there alert,
unable to fall back asleep for what felt like an unbearable stretch of time. Most of them assumed something was medically wrong. Some were prescribed sedatives for a pattern that 400 years earlier required no diagnosis at all, because everyone around them was doing the exact same thing. The biology hadn't changed, the context around it had. A modern body wakes at 2 a.m., checks a phone, sees the time glowing in a specific digital font, and immediately receives a signal that never existed before. Something is wrong. That signal alone releases cortisol, the stress hormone, the opposite of the calm prolactin state we're measured in as volunteers. A 400-year-old body that wakes at 2 a.m. in true uninterrupted dark has no clock to check, no glowing number to panic about. Its prolactin rises, it lies there unbothered, mind loose, half in a dream, half out of one. Same waking moment, completely different chemistry depending only on what greets it, the dark or the light. What if the 2 a.m. waking was never the problem? What if the problem was only ever what we decided it meant? A body that surfaces in the middle of the night calm, not panicked, isn't broken. It's doing something it was built to do. Long before clocks, long before shift work, long before a single word for insomnia existed. For 300,000 years, give or take. Nights were long.
Dark and undivided by artificial light, a body that surfaced for an hour in the middle of that dark wasn't failing to sleep. It was doing something closer to what modern researchers now call quiet rest, a state some compare to a light form of meditation, unplanned, unlabeled, built in. The people who use that hour to pray, to talk quietly, to lie still and think weren't managing a sleep disorder. They didn't have a word for one. They just had a night long enough to hold two different kinds of rest. Modern life compressed that night into a single block and gave the leftover hour nowhere to go. So it still shows up uninvited at 2 a.m. in a body that doesn't know the schedule changed. The exhaustion isn't in the waking, it's in the fight against it. The phone check, the cortisol spike, the mental math of hours lost. A body lying awake doing nothing wrong but treating stillness like an emergency. That's not an ancient rhythm malfunctioning. That's a modern mind misreading an old, familiar signal as new and dangerous. You woke up at some point last night for no clear reason. Lay there for a while in the dark, and probably reached for a reason to explain it. Stress, bad diet, too much screen time before bed? Maybe. But somewhere underneath that is a much older explanation, one that doesn't require anything to be wrong. A body that still remembers a night divided in two, with a quiet hour waiting patiently in the middle, for the dark to hold it the way it used to, before anyone called it a disorder. A candlelit century knew what to do with that hour. It talked quietly, it prayed, it lay still and let the mind wander. A lit-up century checks the time and panics. Same hour, same body, completely different verdict. In 2001, a historian opened 500 diaries and found a night no one remembered forgetting. Somewhere right now, a body is surfacing in the dark at 2 a.m. Not broken, not behind schedule. Just returning for a little while to a rhythm it never actually stopped keeping. Waiting only to see if you'll fight it or let it hold you.